Well, it's not cold, the sun is kind of shining, and it isn't raining. And I also have some of the parts for the Fiesta, they've turned up. So it's time for me to start getting stuck into this and see if I can get this thing back on the road. Number one problem is the ABS light. Now if you remember, when I got the car first, I plugged in the OBD reader and it didn't throw up any ABS codes, but it threw up 3 throttle body codes, including a worrisome limp mode code. That, combined with the sort of erratic idle and the weird throttle response that you get, particularly when it's colder at low speeds, kind of led me to believe that the throttle body on this thing is probably inaccurate. So that's the first thing I've ordered, is a new throttle body. Now you have 3 routes you can go with this. You can go brand new OEM, but they're hundreds of pounds. There are aftermarket ones available for about 1/10 of the price, but from what I've heard, they don't talk to the brain of the car properly. So you're kind of back at square one there. And the third option, which is the one I've gone for, is a salvage part for about 30 quid. So the plan is to get that on today, and that should solve the throttle issue, but it may also, if I'm lucky, solve my ABS problem. Now you might be wondering, how is my throttle body going to help my ABS problem? Well, there's 2 reasons why electronic throttle bodies are now commonplace in cars. The first is emissions, and the second is safety. If you're dealing with something as pernickety as a catalytic converter, you need very precise amounts of fuel and air going into the engine to make it work properly. And an old cable operated butterfly valve just isn't going to do that. And for safety, well, if you think about how ESP and traction control systems work, a key element of that is being able to shut off power to the engine, and the easiest way to do that is taking control of the throttle body. Now this car doesn't have ESP or traction control, but this engine and this system is fitted to a lot of other Fords. So it could just be that because this is a bit dicky, it's not talking to the brain of the car right, and as a default it's going, right, there's a problem with the system, and it's throwing up the only light that this car has, ABS. Swapping out the throttle body on the Fiesta couldn't be simpler because of the way the engine is mounted. This is the cold side of the engine here, so this is the air intake here, and here is the throttle body. To get it off, you just have to take this hose off. It's held in place with sort of 2 hose clamps. They're single-use clamps, so once you break them off, there's no putting them back on again. But I mean, this just needs to be airtight. It would hold itself in place, frankly. So I think a couple of stout cable ties will hold that in place nicely. I don't need to worry about finding new ones of those. There are 4 bolts holding the throttle body itself onto the manifold, and then there's 1 electrical connector, and that is it. It shouldn't take any more than a few minutes to get it off, put the new one on, and hopefully that will solve my running problems, but more importantly my ABS problems. While I'm talking about the way the engine's mounted, because it's cold side front and hot side at the back, that's also part of the reason, well, it is the reason why the power steering on all these Fiestas causes trouble. So you can see the fluid in there is a horrible black color, and you can see the residue all over it. It has boiled in the past, and the reason it does that is because power steering pump feeds sort of pressurized fluid down through that cable, or that hose down there. You can see it's quite oily. It feeds it to the rack around the front of the engine, but then the return hose comes via the back of the engine right past the catalytic converter, and for that reason it never gets a chance to cool down. So one of the things I'm contemplating is whether I put an oil cooler on the power steering system. I'm probably not, because it's one of those jobs that you're not really going to see the benefit of. A better thing to do, they say, is to just change the power steering fluid regularly. In fact, they recommend that you do it when you service the car once a year, and I think it's about a tenner for the fluid. It's not very posh stuff, so that's one of the jobs I'm definitely going to add to my list. But job 1, intake manifold, and let's see if this car runs any better. So we've had some developments. I put the throttle body on, took the Fiesta out for a quick spin, and the ABS line went out, then it came back on again. It's sort of done that before, so nothing unusual there. So I haven't fixed the ABS problem, but it's certainly a lot more drivable. And more interestingly, when I brought the car back in, I have one of these now. This is a little sort of OBD adapter that allows the car to talk to the laptop, and on that I now have this Forescan software, which is a lot more detailed and evolved than the OBDs. It allows me to cancel things a lot more, I guess, more precisely than the standard OBD readers. I can have a proper drill down into the brain of it. Now, I don't know whether it's the throttle body or whatever's caused this, but previously when I've driven the car, cancelled everything, driven the car and come back, everything's been the same and I haven't had any more code, so I've been sort of flying blind. Well, maybe because the throttle body is now talking to the brain right, the brain is now able to process other signals differently, but it has finally thrown up a few more codes, one of which is B1342, which is sort of a generic term for one of the ECUs is not working properly. And given that it's the ABS light that's on and the ABS module has its own little brain, it seems very likely that the root cause of the ABS problem is the module, the ABS module ECU has malfunctioned. So this is good, we're making progress. Having established that my problem is most likely my ABS module, the first job now is to get it out, get the part number off it, and get a new one ordered. Like the throttle body, I'm more than likely going to go down the salvage route. I don't trust aftermarket bits, especially where there's electronics involved, and a new one is eye-wateringly expensive. So I might be able to get a second-hand one relatively cheaply, and hopefully that'll solve my problem. Getting access is not going to be easy. It's at the back of the engine bay here. Getting wrenches around those brake lines is never fun, and I don't know where it's mounted to the body, so there's going to be some exploration getting in there. But the first job was to take the battery and the battery tray out of the way, and when I did that I was presented with this pile of rusting metal. This was quite alarming when I saw it initially, because I thought it was the chassis leg, the engine mount, but it isn't. It's just a plate that rests on top of the engine mount to hold the battery in place, and it's made of mild steel, and it's obviously not really up to the job. So on top of the module, I'm going to have to order one of them as well. But this is the nature of working on old cars. They rarely do a job and find that it costs you less than you thought it was going to. You'll always run into things that break or don't fit, or in this case have rusted away and need replacing. But anyway, I digress. I need to get stuck in, get that module out. If access is easy, I'll pop a new one in. If it's really difficult, I may just go the whole hog and take the gearbox out anyways, because I'm going to change the clutch in this anyways. So yeah, it's just a question now of seeing how all this pans out before deciding what to do next. So it might look and feel a little bit like microsurgery down there. That's because it is really, really tight. But I think I'm almost there as regards getting the ABS module out. It has not been an easy task, let me tell you. There's 3 mounting points. The top 2 flew off, and all the brake lines popped off. But getting this out was a nightmare. Firstly, as you can see, it had rusted and crusted up, so I wasn't able to get a good purchase on it. And then its location, its position, sort of down there on the inside of the chassis leg, made it a nightmare. But here we go. That's my module out now. I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to get it out to tease the brake lines apart, but that's it. Out you come. A few little things are catching, and there. Just stand that up. Right, there it is. It's out. Like I say, when it was in the car, I didn't want to risk breaking these catches. I wanted to get a good look at how these little connectors come out. I know that there's 2 little nubs that are releasing. It's something like this little wheel. I think this is it. I suspect that's one. For 2 of those, I pinch those, and then the whole lot should hinge out. I think that's how it's done. Oh wait, there it is. There it is. Right. One knackered ABS module out. I've serviced a lot of cars over the years, but whoever serviced this last, whoever worked on this last, I've never experienced a case of everything being over tightened. I had to get the impact wrench to get the locking wheel nuts off. I had to get the impact wrench to get the sump plug off, and now I'm using, all my body force to try and get the oil filter off, and it is on there with incredible force. Jesus. Oh, Christ. No word of a lie. That's the tightest oil filter I've ever encountered. Oh, that thing nearly gave me a stroke. Now that it's off, all good, but you know, everything is over tight on this thing. So, oops, it doesn't bode well for trying to get the gearbox off. The only thing is though, the gearbox probably hasn't been removed. I don't think the clutch has ever been changed in it, so that's probably all going to be factory spec, which is usually sensible. This though is ridiculous. Oh. So I took the wheels off, have a little look underneath, and I discovered that my power steering gaiter is all knotted up and actually broken back there. So I don't think that's salvageable. So I just popped off the steering arm, and I'll undo this in a minute and I'll take that off and replace that. I need to order another one of those. And the other little nasty I found was this. That's the reverse gear switch. That at the moment doesn't sit in here properly. I have it wedged in here, but it's loose, so that the casing that is supposed to hold that in place looks as if it's broken. Now I think it's replaceable. I'm hoping that it's all part of the switch, but that is a problem. There's also an awful lot of oil down here, and I think that's all from the power steering. So again, while I'm in here, and because it's all in the same area, there's the power steering hose going back to the rack there. Actually, it's lit for you. So this hose, I think while I have access there and all this out of the way, I'm going to replace the power steering hose as well. It doesn't look great, as you can see it in there. It's quite oily looking. The power steering system makes a whole lot of noise, so yeah, I think I have a few jobs to do simultaneously. Unfortunately, they're all centered around this side of the engine bay, so from that point of view, at least it should be relatively straight. Well, I don't mean relatively straightforward, but at least I don't have to go disassembling the whole other side of the engine. I should be able to do everything. Throttle body, gearbox, clutch, reversing light switch, ABS module, and power steering hose. And that is the majority of the problems that I have with the car. The only other thing that's really a problem are the tires and the blowing exhaust, which shouldn't be too difficult to resolve. I have to say that as a car to work on, it's actually quite nice. A few rusty bolts are annoying, but it's very interesting how it's put together. It's obviously designed to be assembled very quickly, but it also comes apart very quickly and very easily. I mean, these are the two gear linkage cables. This one, there's a little switch on it. You just push that and it releases it, and off it pops. And then the other one, you just have to prise it off. There's a little rubber bung that attaches it. And then where it's seated against the gearbox, there's a little, you can just see them, there's two little prongs that lock it in place. And just, so to release them, you just twist this little thing, this little, I don't know what you call it, it's like a little knob, but it just pulls the two little locking levers out, and out it slides. Really simple. And the other thing that was interesting about it, gearbox wise, is there's a big plastic shroud all over the linkage itself to keep it clean and dry, I guess because of where it's positioned. But you know, they didn't need to do that, but they put a little cover over to keep it all nice and tidy. So yeah, it's interesting engine. There's my what looks like a broken seat for the gearbox for the reverse light switch. It looks hexagon shaped, so I'm hoping when I get the gearbox off that I can take that out and replace it. The gearbox feels fine. It would be very annoying if I had to replace the gearbox over something small and silly like that. So I'll wait until I get it out before I see how that looks. But you know, other than that, given that I hadn't really intended to get stuck into the clutch today or service it really, things are kind of moving along. It's a nice car to work on. It's dark, it's cold, I'm hungry, and I need to consult the workshop manual to figure out what I do next, because I hit a bit of a snag. I've been prepping the car to take the gearbox off so that I can change the clutch, and I noticed there's a lot of oil along the bottom of it here, more than you would expect. The reversing lights also, I've noticed as I've been moving the car around, don't work. I checked the fuses and the bulbs, and the next thing to check then was, well, the switch. And so I came down here today and found this hanging around, just not connected to anything. It should be in a little socket in here. Well, the socket, as I pointed out to you earlier on, is broken. So that would explain why I have no reversing lights. But what's more alarming is that it's hollow. So what's happened, I think, is this is broken, and the previous owner has been driving around with oil basically spitting out of that hole and all the way down the back of the car. And this means that my gearbox may not be in the best of health. I don't know. It feels okay moving around here, but it might be that it's damaged. I don't know. In any case, I need to consult the workshop manual, figure out how to get the gearbox off and where all the studs are and everything, and then take it off, have a look, see what the situation is, see if there are any metal filings or anything obvious. It might be okay. A new plug, a new reverse switch might be enough to fix it, fill it full of oil, it could be okay. But in any case, I knew the car had a dodgy gearbox anyways when I bought it, so if that fixes it, I'm ahead of the game. Otherwise, it's a couple £100, £200 or £300 to get a replacement one. It's money I'd rather not spend, but it's not the end of the world. But other than that, things are going okay. Few little horrors thrown up today, but that's the nature of doing these cars up. But now I need to wrap everything up and go in because I'm freezing.